Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Jimmy Dodd, and he is a brother of an old friend of mine. And so I'm really happy to have you here, Jimmy. So
Hey,
tell,
Ed, thank you. I like the way you said my name. You said my name fast, and my best friends say Jimmy died. So the fact that's how you said it, that makes me feel like you must be a good friend.
I am, even though this is, I think, the only second time we've ever met, but it doesn't matter. We're going to be friends forever now because that's the way this
There you
thing
go.
works. So I'm glad to have you here, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And you're right. I do have an older brother. He's growing older every day, Ed. He's 5 years older, and I'm very grateful to have him as a brother because he's been a good big brother and is one who does a lot of counseling and care for people. I know that there are bad big brothers and there's very healthy, good big brothers, and I had a great big brother. So I will always be deeply grateful that God blessed me with Kenny because he's been fantastic. Yeah, I'm a guy that works with pastors and ministry leaders, and that's my job. But my life is I've got an amazing wife, Sally, five wonderful children, five grandchildren, two kids married, one kid about to get married in just a couple months. I'm based in Kansas City, God's country, best place in the face of the earth. Love Kansas City. Uh, and so, yeah, that's who I am. That's pretty brief, but that's who I am.
Well, that's fantastic. How long have you been doing this service to pastors? What?
Yeah, so I pastored for about 18 years. And then I've been caring for pastors in my role at PastorServe for 26 and a half years. We're coming up on our 27th birthday, which is hard to believe because it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it's been almost 27 years.
So, what is it you do for these pastors? What is it that they need?
Yeah. I mean, like we believe that every pastor needs to have a pastor. Pastors have the same challenges that everybody else does. Pastors have the same, I mean, just the same things in marriage and life and parenting, in finances. I mean, pastors have the same challenges, and yet most pastors feel like there's really no safe place to go to process the challenges in which they face. If you have a pastor, the odds are very likely that your pastor is struggling more than you know. The odds are very, very high because I think that we have really created a false persona of pastors where we put them way, way up on a pedestal and think, well, you know what? My pastor probably doesn't struggle with the same things I struggle. I mean, gosh, I struggle with pornography or lust or, bad language, or I struggle. Yeah, I could go on and on. Um, and you know what? Your pastor probably struggles with a lot of the same things. Um, but they need to have a safe place to go. And PastorServe is a very safe, very confidential, very gospel centric place. I can explain that a little bit, but it's a good place for them to go. And so we coach a lot of pastors. We do care. We do consulting. We train lots and lots of folks in leadership. We do a lot of soul care and then crisis care. So we get calls from pastors oftentimes who are in a very tough situation, and something bad might have happened in their marriage or parenting or whatever it might be, and so we get about, I don't even know exactly. I think we coach each month around 1,000 pastors. And then I think that every year we get probably unique calls from probably 13 to 15,000 pastors.
Wow.
And PastorServe has staff in the US and Haiti. We're in 18 countries in Latin America. And then we have staff in Europe as well. So we have an amazing team that's spread around the world, and all around the world, the needs are very similar. Pastors can feel very isolated, feel very alone, and they long to have a safe place to go just to process all those challenges that they face every day.
I was working with a pastor in Uganda, and he's a great guy. but he was kind of trapped in some limiting beliefs that made it difficult for him to um, financially take care of his family. And he would ask me for money, and I wouldn't give it to him because I said, "You need to develop your relationships, your network of people there, or network of churches, so that they would serve each other, and you take care of each other." And he said, "Well, we don't do it like that here." And I said, "Well, it's time to change." But he wasn't the person who could make that change happen, and it was a tough situation for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there is less than one half of 1% of the world that makes 100,000 or more per year.
Right.
There's there's less than 10% of the world makes 10,000 or more per year. 90% of the world makes $10,000 or less. And the majority of that group makes way under $1,000 a year. And so you think about the world and you think about this big circle, and just that very top piece makes really good income. Where is the church exploding around the world? It's exploding in that 90%.
Yeah.
That's where the church is exploding. It's exploding in Uganda and Africa and Latin America, and we could go on and on.
How,
Why?
how do you explain that?
Because they don't have the burden, and it's like the burden, they don't have the stuff that we have.
The
We have so
the
much
the,
stuff. We
the
have homes and cars and a million hobbies, and we have so much stuff that I think that it creates just a very much an independent mindset of I don't think I need Jesus. I've got stuff. I've got a great life here in the USA. I've got a good life. I've got the things that I need. I've got food in my refrigerator. And the thing which, I just think that we lack so much perspective, Ed. I wish that we could take people in the USA all around the world, because it would help them to gain just perspective of what we have here. A talk that I have shared with a whole lot of groups is that in the USA, like I'll go and I'll you speak with the group and I'll say, hey, listen, just to be really clear, everybody here is rich. And people say, well, yeah, that I know what you mean. We're spiritually rich. I'm like, no, I'm not talking in this case about spiritually rich. I mean, you are physically, monetarily rich. And some people get very offended by that. They're like, you don't know me, you don't know my life situation. And I can say, I can tell by looking at you that you're rich, filthy rich, because rich is a relative term. It's a relative term. So if I live on a street and I want to say, okay, on my street, am I rich? If the average income on my street is $500 a year, and I make 100,000 a year, then on my street, I'm rich. I mean, I'm making so much more than everybody else combined. It's craziness. So there are three things that set us apart significantly from the rest of the world. The first thing is, if you have choices, if you have choice, you're rich, because the overwhelming majority of the world does not have choice. You're going to
Mhm.
wake up every day. You're going to probably have rice and beans for lunch. If you get 2 meals a day, it's very unusual, but you know what? For dinner, you're also going to have rice and beans. And maybe on Fridays, they're going to sprinkle on some fish powder to get some protein. But you're not going to have any choice in food. You're going to wear the same thing every day. You're going to be in the same place every day. There's no choices in the overwhelming majority of the world. And I've been very blessed. I've been to a lot of spots around the world that are very poor. I think I've made like 150 trips to third world countries. So this is not just theory. You watch it, I see it. And so I'm like, if you have choice, we have thousands of choices we have hundreds of thousands of choices every day here, actually, in the USA. We get to choose. I mean, if you're at a restaurant, I mean, like you have a menu, you've got choices. If you're at a Starbucks, you have
Mhm.
choices. I mean, you're going to have which shirt to wear, which pair of pants to wear, which pair of shoes to wear. I mean, like if you stop off at a grocery store, you're going to have like 60 choices of toothpaste. You're going to have scores of choices. Number two, if you have just chances for privacy, if you have chances to go and be alone, you're rich. The majority of the world, they can't drive to a park and just walk alone. They can't go like upstairs in their home or downstairs in their home or out on their balcony in their apartment. That's not the way the world works. Most of the world, you're going to have like 20 people that live in a one room home that has 5 beds, which means you've got to sleep in shifts. And so if it's not my time to work and if it's not my time to sleep, I want to walk the streets. That's why the streets are packed in third world countries.
Yeah.
Streets are always full because people, there's no place to go for just basic privacy. And then third, if you just have basic opportunity, just basic opportunity, you're rich. So there's all sorts of examples. I could say, okay, who's the best golfer in the world right now? You might say it's Scotty Scheffler. And I would say Scotty Scheffler is not the best golfer in the world. Scotty Scheffler is the best golfer in the world of those who've had the opportunity to learn how to play golf, which is a fraction of the world. A fraction of the world has ever had the opportunity to play golf. Um, the odds are very high that if everybody in the world had the same opportunity to play golf, that Scotty Scheffler would not be in the top 1,000. The best golfer in the world never had the opportunity to learn how to play golf. And
That's a
so, I mean,
that's
so
a
like,
that's a very, very interesting perspective because I don't think we have any clue as Westerners or Northern Hemisphere people as to what's going on in those developing parts of the world. In
agreed.
2020, in February of 2020, right before COVID started, I had begun to work with an organization where I was doing leadership development with the teams of a rural economic development organization, and and I was in Kenya. This is in early February, and they were trying to help me. I had been there in February in 2019. I mean, in December of 2019, and done some work with them. And I came back and did some more work with their teams. But then they were trying to show me what they were doing, and their program started with raising chickens because the
Mm,
chicken was the highest had the highest potential for income generation of
sure,
anything.
sure.
And and so they took me out to this farm, and this teacher, um, he's got I think he had 8 kids, and they were all over the place. And but what they did, this was a Saturday, and their cohort that was going through the program at that time was a group of about 25 women,
Mm,
and you can imagine they were scattered around this area. But what they would come 3 times a week for training, and they would
mm,
walk to this place, and they may be walking 5 or 10 miles to get to
mm,
do this training. And so they came to see meet me. They
mm.
created an event where came to meet me as if I'm someone special, and so we sat down and I interviewed them, and I've filmed this, and it's the first episode of the Eddie Network podcast, and it
I love
was
it.
it was amazing because I asked them, well, why do you want to do this? And they said, where there is no income coming in, crime enters the family,
Hmm.
and that we don't want crime in our family. So we need to generate income. And so they're going to learn how to raise chickens, and they're going to learn how to farm, and they're going to learn how to
Mm.
raise cattle, and then they're going to learn how to do forestry. I mean, they're doing the whole thing. I mean, it's just amazing. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking that, they're talking about being very careful with your money. One of the women said, I need to generate enough money so when I'm not physically able to do the work, I will
Mm,
have something to
wow.
live on. I mean, so
Wow.
they were taking a long view. This is not short-termism at all. And then they asked me, so what about you? How do you make your money? And I was, I'm thinking, well, I get I have money that comes from working with people, consulting work and coaching work, and and then I realized that so much of what we do here in the West is dependent upon being able to take a loan out, take a mortgage out. And I told them that. I said a lot of the way we make money is to invest in things by taking borrowing money in order to make money. And they just looked at me with this kind of stunned. And I realized how problematic that was. I'd never thought about it in that way, but it was really problematic. And it was really quite a moment. And it's there in the podcast, and they were really great, and I said to them, I said, it would be great for you to come to America and talk about this because we don't have a clue as to what you're talking about.
Mm. It's interesting because in a lot of the poorest spots in the world, loans are starting to become extremely important, but they're loans of
Very small loan.
50 or $60. Oh yeah, exactly
Yeah,
right. They're micro loans.
yeah.
And all sorts of research says that the men, for the most part, do not pay back microloans. Women do. So the
Yep.
microloans are made to the women. And it's amazing the stories of businesses that have been started on very small amounts of money and then paid back. And just a small investment can change somebody's life. It's incredible.
What I don't think anyone realizes that Kenya, where I was a matriarchal society until it began to develop relationships outside of Kenya, and they realized that it needed to become patriarchal in order to relate to the countries of the rest of the world. And
Interesting.
I mean that says a lot about how confused we get. Though it is rather fascinating. Um, so, what do you see in terms of longevity of pastors serving today? I just saw something on YouTube where it was talking about a lot of pastors are leaving the ministry and I don't know if that's an accurate thing or something like that, but I mean you're right there at the cutting edge of dealing with pastors' lives. So what do you see happening?
Yeah, I mean we're in a very, very crucial point right now that there will be some massive changes over the next decade because over the next like 5 or 6 years, probably 1 in 4 pastors retire. We have an aging pastor population. So it's the same with a lot of groups out there. You could take like police officers. We're in a really rough place as far as police officers because in the midst of George Floyd and COVID and this and that, more and more people are like, okay, I don't want to be a police officer. That's the last job in the world I want. Oh my goodness, the pressure. And I mean, you think about, they're just in the news for so many negative things. And so there's more and more of you've got a lot of police officers retiring and very few in the academy. And I'm telling you, we have a massive crisis coming where we will not I mean, like you just won't have enough police. It's going to be a crisis. It's the same thing, with pastors is that we have gone so far down in seminaries and Bible colleges. I know the last year there were combined between every Bible college, every seminary, everything out there, there were about 67,000 students, which is like half of what it was. I mean, like only 6 years ago. And so there are more and more people saying, I don't want to be a pastor. So it's why? Well, because they watched things in the midst of COVID. Because I think, because you think about COVID, you think about politics. You think about, I mean, just all the racial issues, and they watch pastors, and it was like a no-win situation. It was like, man, I mean, you could say, man, I believe in this or I believe in this, and you're going to have somebody in the church that's very angry with you. So I think the church, that we really bred an angry church, especially in the past probably 10 to 15 years. And I think the reason why we have really angry churches is because we have churches filled with people not being discipled by Jesus. They're being discipled by the 24-hour news cycle. That's where they're spending their time. They're being practically, functionally discipled by cable news and not by the church, not by pastors, and not by Jesus. And so you have people that come in with very strong views. And I think the pastors saw, I mean, it's a no-win situation. I want to have a huge part of the church really angry with me if I speak up on anything. So I think that we are more and more in a crisis period where there's going to be a lot more pastors retiring over the next decade, especially, and you will not have young people that will step up and take over those roles because people don't want those roles. And so, like, I know that there's a very significant denomination, and they've had a rule for 100 years. You've got to go to our schools to pastor our churches. And they just changed that. And they said, we have to change it because there's not enough students in our schools to take over all these churches. And we've got lots of pastors retiring. So we have to change that rule. And I think you're going to see more and more of that of there's just going to be just a huge desperation for pastors. And so I think we're at a real crisis point where there's going to be a huge need for pastors, and you will not have a lot of young people that are in line to fill that role because they watched the way that the church treated their pastors over the past, 6 to 8 years. And they've said, I want nothing to do with that. Why would I want to step into that role? And so I think we're at a real, crisis point.
I agree with you, and this is kind of the way I see it. I see this as sort of the end of a long um, period of a certain type of church. And it began with the Protestant Reformation. So we're going to go back, 600 years, because I see that what we've had are churches that were um, primarily oriented around observing and watching someone up, someone up on a stage, speaking to them, and that's what the perception of the world of what a church is. And I think what will happen is that the leadership of churches will become very dispersed, and the role of pastor may even disappear as we know it. And what we'll find is a lot of lay people who are taking on those roles, but they're taking on only part of the role, and so the church becomes much more of a community instead of an organizational structure.
Hmm.
What do you think
That's
of that?
that's an interesting observation. Yeah, yeah, um,
For
yeah,
example, I attend an Anglican church. I'm Presbyterian, but I started attending an Anglican church on Sunday nights because I like the people who are leading it. There are two
mm,
guys. One's in his, I think one's in his 40, maybe they're both in their 40s, who are deacons, and they're moving towards ordination. But this church was formed by five families who moved down here to Winston-Salem from Pennsylvania to start this church.
mm,
And and so these families are the core of this church. And
mm,
it's not the two pastors. And it's a really interesting thing. And for me it's kind of a case study in, well, is this a representation of the future? And and what I also see there is that because there is this attention to the liturgy, Anglican liturgy, which is basically the same every week. There is a formality which is also rather relaxed, which is showing, okay, this is what we believe, this is who we are, and it's constantly referencing this is who we are, this is what we believe, so that we never lose that. I mean, that's what I saw in my leadership work was that one of the most important roles of a leader is that they're constantly telling the people, this is who we are, this is what we believe, these are our values, so that people never forget that and they say, this is why I'm here. I mean, a business leader does that, a church leader should be doing that, a political leader should be that. This is who we are, this is why we do this. And I mean, that's what I did as the scoutmaster of my son's Boy Scout troop. We had five principles we operated on, and I shared those five principles verbally with everyone every week.
Mm.
And then I went back and after leaving that group, and I went back 12 years later, and they were still operating by those five principles.
I love it.
So I think that this is the transition point that we're making, and that the hierarchies that we have seen in organizations are failing, but the people aren't failing. The people are rallying to figure out how are we going to make this work, and that's what I've been seeing. And the last point I want to make: when I lived in Wyoming, I lived in Jackson Hole for 6 years, and I was a member of the Presbytery of Wyoming, and as and I didn't have a church, but I became the moderator of the Committee on Ministry, which was the committee of the Presbytery that managed the relationship between pastors and churches. And
Mm.
I ended up going to almost every church in the Presbytery at some point during those 6 years. So I covered the entire state, and they just covered my costs, and so I saw all these differences of what was going on, and it was really very instructive. And what I also saw was it was very difficult to get people to come to Wyoming because
Mm.
of its remoteness. And
Hmm.
and if you were married, your spouse may have had a job that there wasn't any opportunity for them to do their job there in Wyoming, and so they couldn't. So it was very difficult to get pastors to come there. And so a program in lay ministry was developed and is now training people in the local church to be essentially the pastor who is administering worship and the committees and that sort of thing. And then they have other people who are doing pastoral care and stuff like that.
Mm. Mm. Well, yeah, that there's no doubt that we need to have community, that we're created, I think, to have community.
Yeah.
And I think is I believe that the church is the best place to go for your community. That there is a there was a there's there it's not there was there is a long study being done on it's just on flourishing, and it was done by Harvard and Baylor and Pepperdine, and they have walked with the same group of like 250,000 people. It's like the largest study of people in human history. And it was, I mean, it's just been a huge study. And so, like, if you look up, human flourishing and like Harvard, it pops up. It's all there. But there is now data. There is now data that if you are in a church community, that you will be happier. Your life will flourish more if you're a part of a community in, I mean, like a local church. So I think that, for years and years, people say, well, you should come to church because it's just a great place. Hey, there's now research and data. If you're lonely, if you need to flourish, if you want community, the local church is the best place to go because it will help you to flourish in life. And I love the fact that now that there's actually data out there.
So how does a pastor, and I'm thinking about all the pastors I've known over my 50 years of doing some sort of ministry. How does a pastor who maybe comes at this from a very biblical or theological orientation. They love the Bible. They know it backwards and forwards. They know the theology of the church. They know all of this stuff, and they really love standing up and preaching. This is their thing, and it's almost a sort of a head sort of faith that they're presenting, even if it's true. But what is needed from them is for them to be the leader of a community. So how do seminaries or other training schools help new pastors learn how to be the community leader of their fellowship or their church?
Yeah, that's a great question. I spoke with a leader of a big denomination, of a big denomination, and he said to me, and he had a statement, and I just said, okay, you know what? I just want you to unpack that. He said, our training is a lie. And I said, okay, help me understand what you mean by that. And he said, because we're trained in community, we're trained in seminaries, and we go to these seminaries, we're in classrooms, we're with the same people, we have meals with them. Oftentimes they become our best friends. We socialize with them. So we're in this place for 3, 4, 5 years, and we are in community. We're trained. So everything we learn is in the context of community. And then we're done and we're sent out to these churches into complete isolation. And we're not trained how to find community there. So we're trained in community, we're sent out, and we're in just like utter isolation. And so this pastor said, I feel like the things I learned were almost a lie, because it's like, wait a second, you trained me in community. Now I don't have community. So the things which I was trained in, I can't apply here because I don't have a community. And we talk to more and more pastors who just feel lonely and isolated, but there are ways to find community. I mean, you call PastorServe, and we oftentimes can help you to find community. There's cohorts, there's more and more, there's more things online now. There's more and more Zoom cohorts. It's like, yeah, but that's not face to face, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah,
I mean, I completely agree. Zoom is not the ideal, but it's better than nothing.
that's
So
right.
you can at least be able to meet with a group of 6 people and at least be able to talk about things and be open and honest and know that this is a safe, confidential place. But it's essential for pastors and ministry leaders to find places where they can go to be honest and real about everything that they face. Because if they don't, they're going to be in just utter isolation, and that's a dark place to be.
I think your brother's church in San Diego is one
Yeah,
of the finest I've ever seen.
it's incredible. It's wonderful. Everybody should go there.
And I think it is because he stayed there so long and he changed over time and allowed the dynamic of that community to lead it forward. And
Mhm.
I don't know what he did other than he managed the perception of who we are so that new things could come, and they're all over the world. And it's remarkable. I When I was living um in Jackson Hole, so we're going back probably 8 years. Um, I had gone through a divorce, so we were trading the children off from one Christmas to the next. So I had a Christmas where I wasn't going to be with my kids. So I said, I'm going to go travel. Um, I'm going to go down through Arizona, and I'm going to go through New Mexico, and I ended up in San Diego, and I called your brother, and this is, and it's also Kathy too. But I called your brother a day or two before. I said, "Hey, I'm going to be in San Diego. When are your services?" And so I went to Christmas Eve service, and then I went to I think there was a Christmas Day service, and then I went to their house for Christmas Day uh, dinner. And I was just so taken by how easy it was for them to say, "Well, hey, come join us." And there was never any, well, let's think about this. How are we going to make this work? No, we just, well, you come and we'll make it work. And it was fantastic, and I'll cherish it forever because it was um, it was such a great experience.
I love that. You know what? If you live anywhere close to San Diego and you want community, I want to tell you there is more community in their backyard, Ed, than there
Yeah.
are probably in most churches up and down California. They do so much. And I mean, they have groups like I just saw that this week. I got a picture and it was young people, probably between 20 and 28 years old on the average. And there had to be 125 people in their backyard in this picture. And I know that there are multiple events each week in their back. That's the joy of San Diego. It's always nice weather. It's always perfect weather. So it's like, well, yeah, I live in the Rocky Mountains. We can't, but I'm telling you, it works in San Diego. They do more in their backyard. I would guess in the average year, thousands upon thousands and thousands of people find community uh, in their backyard. So not just your church on Sunday morning, but outside of Sunday morning, in just meals and times to get together to watch World Cup games, or I mean, like, whatever it might be. But there is community that's happening in their backyard that's probably doing more for the souls of people than a lot of things that might look to be bigger or better. But it's one thing to have things that are just giant and huge. It's one thing to create really authentic community. I think you can do both. It's rare, but I can promise you that they're doing authentic, community there.
Well, aren't we talking about what we're, let me back up. Aren't we raising the question of what is leadership?
I think that's a big piece of it. I think you've got to create community as a leader. Yes.
And and that's comes back. I don't think you can train people to do leadership in that regard. I think you have to embrace them in such a way that they learn how to be in community. Because being community is not the same thing as following a script. I mean, this podcast, we're not following a script. We're just talking to, I just have, you say something, I have a question, let me ask you this, or let me say this. I have a story to tell. And that's, but you say most of us are not trained that way. We're trained to follow some agenda or some you know, some some order, some filter that requires us to be compliant with that filter, and and that doesn't work if you want to build community. You have to say, well, who are you, and what is it that you what are you doing? Like I'll give you an example. This happened the other day. I was at my local coffee shop where I work a lot. I'm sitting there. This is Friday afternoon, and it's probably about 4 o'clock, and all these guys, these young guys, not really young, not college age, but kind of late 20s, 30s guys, maybe some in their early 40s, walk in and they go over to the side of the space and they move some tables around and they sit down but they're sitting two by two and I'm thinking what's going on here? So I go over there and I look down at the table and these guys are playing Go, the game Go, which is like, it's like a Chinese chess game. And I said, "You're playing Go." I said, "Yeah." He says, "I played that when I was a kid." He says, "Well, why don't you join us?" I mean, this is how community is made. I said, "I'm going to try to figure out a way to to put this thing in my schedule so I can come play Go with you guys." And but that's the kind of thing that spontaneity is the kind of thing that I think people are looking for, where they're not judged and they're not put into a box, but they want to be recognized, they want to be seen, they want to be some appreciation, some affirmation, that sort of thing. And these kind of what they used to call social mediating institutions, it's not an institutional structure, but it's a community structure. Social media and communities are how people learn how to be who they are, and that's particularly true for churches when they're healthy.
And I think that real, truly, I mean, to be really, really authentic in community, it means that you have to be, I think, a bit vulnerable. You have to be open about yourself
Yeah,
and your own struggles and everything else. I think that people have to sense I have a leader and they're actually authentic. So I think that there are massive barriers to being authentic, and the main barrier is that I think Satan, who I think is a very real person of force in our world, has a very small toolbox. And I think his primary tool is he whispers lies into our ears and we believe those lies. And I think that his primary lie is this: don't be authentic with anybody, because if people really knew you, they wouldn't like you. So don't be authentic with anybody
yeah,
because there's way too much of a risk. And everybody, I can tell you, everybody has that fear. Hey, if I was completely open and honest with you about all the stuff in my life, if I was completely open and vulnerable, you probably wouldn't like me. Everybody has that fear. Everybody has that fear. But if we can just say, listen, I'm a very broken person. I've got issues in my life. I am so far from perfect. I sin. Trust me, I sin every day. I do stupid things and make stupid decisions and struggle with pride and arrogance and anger and on and on. Here's who I am, and I'm desperately clinging to Jesus because I want to be made more and more like Him. If we can just be real, that's that's attractive to people,
yeah.
and they want to come to be a part of a community that's led by somebody that is real and authentic and genuine. And yet so many pastors, I think, are scared to be genuine because they believe that lie of, hey, if you really get to know me, you won't like me. It's like, man, don't believe that lie. That's straight from the pit of hell. And we need to be authentic and real and open and honest and say, listen, I might be the pastor of this church. I need God's grace as much as you need God's grace. Man, I don't think I'm above God's grace. I don't think that, you're in this, place of this situation and you just shared with me you're in the midst of a divorce and you're addicted to this thing or that thing. I don't think you're in a bad place and I'm not. I think we're both in rough places and we both desperately need Jesus. And if we ever get to a place where we don't believe that, I think that we're in huge trouble. I think we have to be authentic and real, and that is attractive, and that is so often a basis for real, true, authentic community.
To what extent do you see that sort of piece of reality that you just described either advancing or declining in our culture today?
That's a great question. I think it's probably declining because, I mean, Ed, when we were in high school, there was nobody there recording and tweeting about every stupid thing that we did.
Right.
And we both did a lot of stupid things, I'm sure. We
Oh
live
yeah.
in such a pressure. Yeah, Ed, don't start, Ed.
I'm
Come
not.
on, it's a limited podcast, Ed.
It didn't
But
start in
anyway,
high school either.
yeah, it probably started in. Yeah, that's same for me. I was a
Yeah.
hellion in grade school. But
Yeah.
anyway, I got kicked out of nursery. But anyway, that's a whole nother story for another time. But yeah, I mean, we live in such such a social media driven world where it's like, okay, if I stand up and try to be authentic and real, somebody might post things about me and say, hey, our pastor apparently is struggling with, that their marriage isn't perfect. Apparently my pastor is struggling, he's got some anger issues. And so I think there's fear there. And I think that a lot of pastors are paralyzed. Man, I can't be that open and honest, because if I was open and honest and everybody knows all my junk, they might fire me. And vocationally, I don't have a plan B, so I can't lose my job. So I'm going to play it safe, and I'm not going to talk about my own issues. And so I think that that is a very real fear for a lot of pastors of, um,
Yeah,
man, if everything about me gets out there, my church will fire me.
I agree with you. And I think pastors are one version of that, but I think most of us feel that same way
Sure.
because there are all these kind of social expectations for us to be a certain way, have certain ideological thoughts or opinions, to be advocates of things. And I think the pressure to conform to a certain conception of what society is so huge. It was never like this for me growing up, but it is now. And I think, I mean, part of what I'm doing here is giving people a way to say, I'm going to reject all that. I'm just going to be who I am, and and I'm going to live an unscripted life. And I didn't know what I was doing when I started this. I just wanted to talk to people. But that's what's emerged, and that's what people are telling me. And
Hmm.
so to to attach my thought to what you just said, I have hope that we're on the cusp of change, and I don't think it's going to solve the organizational structure problems of churches, but I think it's going to be manifested in people deciding that they want to care for one another, and they're going to find a way to make their churches work because of that.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
whatever they thought was, well, this is how we've always done it. I mean, that's I worked with a church 20 years ago where they had done a very good job over 20 years of whittling down the church from 1,200 members to 200 members. And why was that? It's because they had an allegiance to a previous long-term pastor who is deceased, and they said we're going to honor him in everything we do. And all the new people that came didn't understand who was this guy, and they couldn't tell them who he was because they didn't know who he was, but they were
Right.
following. So I think that these
Hmm.
organizational practices are dead, and I think people are smart, and I think they're creative, and they're going to figure out we need to change things. And I think the last place they change is in the headquarters of denominations and in the president's offices and the board rooms of seminaries, because they are committed to maintaining what they've always had. That's where their power has come from. But their power means nothing anymore.
Hmm.
And what the power lies with the individual saying, "This is what I believe, and this is where my commitment is coming from."
Hmm.
And for that reason, Jimmy, I am extraordinarily hopeful about the future. Doesn't mean it's going
Hmm.
to be easy, but I am really hopeful because I see that once we've exhausted the way we have been doing things, we have to figure out something new. And people are not just going to sit by and kind of die. They're going to say, "Okay, Johnny, let's get together. Let's go over and take care of our neighbors over there. You know,
Yep.
she can't mow her grass, so we're going to go mow her grass. You know, let's go do
Yeah.
something." That sort of thing I see emerging as the third great awakening.
Hmm.
Uh, and maybe even be even more explicit. I saw this decline in organizations 25 years ago. I saw it happening, and I felt then that the only thing that would emerge out of this would be the revitalization of community,
Hmm.
and that the only institutional structure that had been founded as a community was the church. So the church would
That's
have to
good.
learn how to be a community again. And when it does, it will attract people to it. And all these people who hate the church or hate God or whatever, and I know them, and they've told me face to my face that this is what they think. Will find that whatever they thought it was is no longer that.
It's good stuff, Ed. It's good.
Jimmy, thank you for being here. Send me stuff so that people can find you. And one of the things that has made this podcast work, is that we have networked through introductions. So people that you think should be on here talking about these things, introduce them to me, and I'll invite them on.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
but I
And you know
also
what? If anybody goes to PastorServe.org, it's all there. You're going to find my stuff there, contact info there. You're going to find ways to get, like if you're a pastor, you're going to find ways to get help there. But there's going to be all sorts of resources there. There's a lot on that web page. So PastorServe.org. It's very simple.
and what I'm also saying is that if you are a member of a church and you care about your pastor, introduce him to PastorServe or her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And if you're a member of a church and you want to know practical ways to care for your pastors, I've got, books that can help in this area. Probably the most popular book to help in that area is a book called Pastors Are People Too. And you can buy that on Amazon and just look up Jimmy Dodd books and you'll see books. And if you're a pastor, I would say that Survive or Thrive is the best book for pastors.
very good. Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Appreciate you very much.
Ed, great to be with you. Feel
And
honored to be on the show with you.
and
And God
let's talk.
bless Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk for a few minutes after we're done, and I thank you for being here. I thank you all for watching. I know many of you, this is an alien world that you're hearing about, but it's not alien to what it means to be a human being. And so if you are a person who feels like you're missing something in terms of community, then maybe you should go look for something where you live, some fellowship, some communal group of people who have a faith tradition, and go align yourself with them. See what they're doing, and try many of them. Go do your longitudinal study and see what you find in your own community. I think you'll be surprised. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast.